A millionaire was celebrating the launch of his latest real estate project when two little girls pushed through the crowd and shouted, "I know you! You're our daddy!" The cameras froze. His heart stopped. And in that single moment, his carefully built world began to crumble. What followed was a journey of truth, second chances, and the unexpected bond between a powerful man and the daughters he never knew he had. A story of identity, healing, and love rediscovered through innocence. Get ready. This one will touch your heart. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, and tell us where you're watching from. Sometimes the words of a child can shatter even the most carefully constructed life. The November air carried the scent of salt and impending rain as Alexander Chen stood before his newest achievement. Sunlight glinted off the scissors in his hand, their polished surface reflecting the crowd that had gathered for the ceremony. The ribbon before him, crimson silk against the gleaming glass facade of the monarch, trembled slightly in the coastal breeze. This moment represented everything he had built over 42 stories of luxury apartments, a rooftop garden that seemed to touch the clouds, and a waiting list of buyers willing to pay millions to claim a piece of his vision. The development would redefine the skyline of Port Aurora, transforming the once sleepy fishing town into a beacon of modern luxury. Alexander adjusted his tailored suit, feeling the weight of expectant gazes. Investors stood to his right, their smiles practiced and patient. Journalists clustered to his left, cameras poised to capture the precise moment metal would meet silk. Everything was proceeding according to plan. The speech delivered with practiced charm, the handshakes firm and confident, the future secure. "Mr. Chen will now officially open the monarch," announced her voice carrying across the plaza. He raised the scissors, aware of how this image would appear in tomorrow's business page. The narrative was perfect. Immigrant son rises to reshape the very landscape of his adopted homeland. Self-made, disciplined, untouchable. The scissors opened wide, ready to close around the ribbon. Then came the sound, small shoes scuffing against concrete, movement in the perfectly arranged crowd. Two little figures pushed through the forest of adults, their oversized sweaters billowing in the wind, dark hair tangled from running. Alexander barely registered them at first. His focus narrowed to the ribbon and the cameras. Then he felt a tug on his coat, insistent, urgent. He looked down. Two faces stared up at him, round cheeks flushed from cold and exertion, eyes wide with wonder and recognition. Identical twins, perhaps 5 or 6 years old, their matching navy sweaters frayed at the sleeves. Before security could intervene, the slightly taller one reached up and grabbed his sleeve again. Her voice rang out, clear and certain, loud enough to silence the entire plaza. "I know you! You're our daddy!" Time crystallized. The scissors slipped from his grasp, narrowly missing his polished shoes before clattering against the concrete. Flashes from cameras flickered like lightning, capturing the moment his face transformed from confident CEO to stunned silence. Someone gasped. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Alexander's publicist stepped forward, her expression a mixture of horror and damage control calculations. But Alexander couldn't move, couldn't speak. The world around him blurred as he stared into the girl's eyes. Dark, intelligent, and somehow familiar. Something in their shape, in the determined set of their small jaws, in the slight dimple on the left cheek of the one who had spoken. His carefully constructed world, each brick laid with precision, each relationship measured for its value, began to fracture. Not because of scandal or public perception, but because of something far more terrifying. Recognition. He knew those eyes. They were his own. Meilin Wong hummed softly as she folded fresh laundry, the repetitive motion soothing after a long day. Steam rose from the machines behind her, warming the small storefront against the November chill. Outside, streetlights flickered on, casting golden pools across the wet sidewalk. Her laundromat, Sunshine Wash and Fold, had served the neighborhood. For 30 years, passed down from her mother, who had established it after immigrating from Taiwan in the 1980s. The bell above the door jingled, and Meilin looked up to see her nieces, not by blood, but by love, bursting through the entrance, breathless and disheveled. "Auntie! Auntie May!" They spoke almost in unison, their voices high with excitement. "Lily, Daisy," setting aside. "Where have you been? You were supposed to be home from school hours ago." The girls exchanged glances, a silent conversation passing between them as only twins could manage. Finally, Lily, the bolder of the two by mere minutes, stepped forward. "We saw him, Auntie. We really did." "Saw who?" Meilin asked, though something in her chest tightened with apprehension. "Our daddy," Daisy said, her voice softer than her sister's, but equally certain. The one from Mama's. The one who folds paper cranes and drinks coffee so strong it makes your nose wrinkle. Melin's hands stilled on the laundry. For 5 years, she had raised these girls as her own after their mother, her dearest friend, had disappeared, leaving only a letter and 2 confused toddlers. For 5 years, she had listened to them repeat stories about a father who existed only in their mother. A shadow figure she had begun to doubt was real. "Girls," he said carefully, "we've talked about this. Those are just stories." "No!" Lily stamped her foot. "It's him. We saw his picture in the newspaper yesterday, and today we went to his building opening. He looks exactly like Mama said, and he has eyes like ours." Malin crossed the small space and knelt before them, examining their wind-chapped faces. "You went downtown? Alone?" Concern overwhelmed her momentary shock. "You know you're not supposed to take the bus by yourselves." "But we had to see," Daisy explained, her small hand reaching for Malin's. "Mama always said he went away to become important. And now he's back, and he's building the tallest building in Port Aurora." A cold realization washed over Malin. There was only one major development being unveiled today. She had seen the billboards for months. The Monarch, the crown jewel of Chen Developments. Alexander Chen. The name had meant nothing to her until this moment. Lily's eyes shone with unshed tears. "I told him who we are, but he looked scared. Then some people took us away and put us on a bus home. They said we were confused." Malin gathered them into her arms, feeling their small bodies tremble against her. Above their heads, her eyes caught the evening news playing on the small television in the corner of the laundromat. There, frozen on the screen, was the image of Alexander Chen, tall, imposing, impeccably dressed, staring down at 2 small girls in navy sweaters, his face a mask of shock. The caption scrolled beneath, "Local billionaire's opening ceremony interrupted by unexpected claim." Alexander's penthouse occupied the top floor of the spire, his first successful development in Port Aurora. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the bay, the distant lighthouse pulsing rhythmically against the gathering darkness. Rain had begun to fall, droplets racing down the glass like tears. He stood motionless before the windows, tie loosened, jacket discarded, a tumbler of whiskey untouched in his hand. Behind him, voices argued in hushed tones. "The market opened down 3 points after the incident," said Martin Wells, his financial advisor, scrolling through figures on his tablet. "Nothing critical yet, but investors are nervous. They want a statement." "This is clearly an attempt at extortion," added Patricia Lawson, head of his legal team. Her voice was clinical, detached. "These things happen when people reach your level of visibility, Alexander. We'll issue a denial and investigate the woman behind this." "If there even is a woman," cut in David Zhao, his publicist, who had been frantically making calls since the ceremony collapsed. "This could be a publicity stunt from a competitor. Maybe Fisher Development is trying to sabotage the Monarch launch." Alexander remained silent, watching raindrops merge and separate on the glass. In his mind, he saw not the concerned faces of his team, but the determined expressions of 2 little girls who had looked at him with absolute certainty. "Alexander?" Patricia's voice cut through his thought. "We need a decision. The press is waiting for a statement." He turned, facing the 3 people who managed the machinery of his empire. "What do we know about them?" David glanced at his notes. "Twin girls, approximately 6 years old. They arrived unaccompanied. Security escorted them to public transportation. We have their images from the security footage, but no names yet." "Find them," Alexander, his voice betraying no emotion. "To serve a cease and desist?" Patricia asked, already reaching for her phone. "No." Alexander set down his drink. "Find them so I can speak with them." The room fell. "Martin, Alexander, with all due respect, engaging with directly validates. Let us handle it through proper channels." "I'm not asking for permission," Alexander, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Find them discreetly, and until then, we say nothing to the press." After they filed out, muttering concerns, Alexander returned to the window. Below, the city lights blurred through the rain-streaked glass, each droplet distorting the view like fractured memories. 6 years ago, he had known a woman, Lin Mei Hua. They had met at a community fundraiser where he was cultivating connections for his fledgling development company. She taught at a local elementary school, her passion for education evident in how she spoke about her students. She was nothing like the calculated, ambitious people who usually occupied his world. Their relationship had been brief but intense, a moment of genuine connection in his otherwise strategic life. Then, without explanation, she vanished. No calls, no messages. He had told himself it was for the best. Relationships were distractions. Emotional entanglements were inefficient. He had buried the memory, convinced himself it meant nothing. Until today. Alexander reached for his phone and pulled up a browser, typing Alexander Chen Port Aurora ceremony. Immediately, images appeared. His shocked face, two small girls in navy sweaters, security leading them away. In one photo, he could clearly see their faces. The resemblance struck him with physical force. The shape of their eyes, the determined set of their jaws, the way their hair fell across their foreheads, all echoed his own childhood photograph. For the first time in years, Alexander Chen felt something crack within his carefully maintained composure. Not fear of scandal or concern for his business, but something far more primal and unexpected: recognition. And with it came a flood of questions he had never allowed himself to consider. Who were these children? Where was their mother? And if what they claimed was true, if they were indeed his daughters, what kind of father would abandon his own blood without ever knowing they existed? The rain intensified, drumming against the glass like accusatory fingers. Alexander pressed his palm to the cold surface, watching as the heat from his skin created a momentary fog. There, then gone, like the family he never knew he might have had. 2 days after the ceremony, Alexander found himself parked across the street from Sunshine Wash and Fold. His investigators had been efficient, tracing the girls to this small laundromat in the older part of town. He had come alone, dismissing his driver with instructions to return in an hour. Through the steamy windows, he could see movement: a woman folding sheets, two small figures darting between tables. His hands tightened on the steering wheel as he recognized the twins from the ceremony, now dressed in matching red cardigans over simple dresses. A light rain began pattering against the Alexander reached for what right did he to disrupt their life? Perhaps this was best handled. As he debated, the laundromat door opened and the twins emerged beneath a shared umbrella. They wore backpacks shaped like animals, a panda and a tiger, and clutched lunchboxes in their free hands. School, he realized. They were heading to school. Without conscious decision, Alexander exited his car and followed at a distance. The girls walked with the confident familiarity of a daily routine, occasionally stopping to jump in puddles or examine something in a shop window. They moved in perfect synchrony, one often completing a sentence the other had started. 4 blocks later, they reached Port Aurora Elementary School. Alexander watched as they joined the stream of children entering the building, their shared umbrella closing with a snap before they disappeared inside. A sign near the entrance announced, "Fall Festival, this Friday, all families welcome." Alexander stood in the gentle rain, an unfamiliar tightness in his chest. Families, a word that had never applied to him. Orphaned at 12, raised by a distant uncle who viewed him as an obligation rather than a child, Alexander had built his empire precisely because he had nothing, no connections, no distractions, no one to disappoint or be disappointed by. Now, watching those 2 small figures vanish into the school building, he felt something he had spent decades suppressing: longing. The school day would end at 3:15. He made a note in his calendar, cancelling a meeting with potential investors. Some things, for once, would have to wait. At precisely 3:10, Alexander returned to the elementary school, positioning himself across the street where he could observe without being immediately noticed. Children began streaming out at 3:15, their voices creating a cheerful cacophony that echoed off the brick buildings. The twins emerged at 3:22, still sharing their umbrella despite the rain having stopped hours ago. They walked with purpose, occasionally consulting a piece of paper they passed between them. Instead of turning toward the laundromat, they headed in the opposite direction toward the downtown district. Alexander followed, maintaining a careful distance. The girls navigated the increasingly busy streets with surprising confidence, checking street names against their paper. As they approached the business district, Alexander realized with growing alarm where they were headed: Chen Development Headquarters. He watched as they entered the gleaming 40-story building that served as his company's nerve center. Through the glass front, he could see them approach the reception desk, standing on tiptoes to speak with the security guard. The man shook his head, gesturing toward the exit. The twins emerged moments later, disappointment evident in their slumped shoulders. They sat on a bench outside the building, heads bent together in conference. Alexander approached slowly, uncertain what he would say, but knowing he couldn't simply watch from a distance any longer. He was 5 yards away when Lily, the one who had spoken at the ceremony, looked up and saw him. Her eyes widened and she elbowed her sister. Both scrambled to their feet, staring at him with a mixture of awe and apprehension. "Hello," Alexander estranged. Hi. An awkward silence fell. Alexander had negotiated billion-dollar deals, charmed investors, and managed teams of hundreds, yet he found himself utterly speechless before these two small children. Finally, Daisy, the quieter one, stepped forward and held out a folded piece of construction paper. "We made this for you." Alexander accepted it with careful hands. Unfolded, it revealed a crayon drawing of the Monarch, his newest building, complete with a red ribbon across the front. At the bottom, in careful block letters, "For Daddy from Lily and Daisy." "How did you know where I work?" he asked, his voice steadier than he felt. "We saw it in the newspaper," Lily explained, pointing to the building behind them. "And this is where important people work. Mama said you went away to become important." "Your mother," Alexander said carefully. "Where is she now?" The twins exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. "She had to go away," Daisy said finally. "But she told us about you. She said you loved strong coffee and folded paper cranes, and that one day, when you were done being important, you might come find us." Alexander felt the world tilt slightly beneath paper cranes. Lynn had been fascinated by his ability to fold origami cranes, a skill taught by his mother before her death. It was a detail so intimate, so specific, that it could not be coincidental. "Do you live nearby?" he asked, aware of curious glances from passers-by. "With Auntie May," Lily said, "above the laundry store. She's not really our auntie, but she takes care of us since Mama went away." "Does your auntie know you're here?" Both girls suddenly found the sidewalk very interesting. "We were supposed to go straight home," Daisy admitted. "Then I should take you back," Alexander said, making a decision. "She'll be worried." The walk back to Sunshine Wash and Fold was filled with the twins' chatter. They pointed out their favorite spots in the city: a park with a spiral slide, a bakery that made mooncakes during festivals, a corner where street musicians played on weekends. Alexander listened, absorbing details of lives that had been unfolding parallel to his own, separated by mere miles but worlds apart in experience. As they approached the laundromat, Alexander saw a woman pacing outside, phone pressed to her ear. When she spotted the twins, she rushed forward, relief washing over her features before hardening into stern concern. "Lily, Daisy, where have you been? I've been calling the school, the neighbors." She broke off as she noticed Alexander standing behind. Recognition flickered in her eyes, followed immediately by wariness. She pulled the girls closer to her side, protective. "Mr. Chen," she said, her voice controlled but cool. "I see you've met the girls." "Ms. Wong?" Alexander extended his hand formally. "I believe we need to talk." The apartment above Sunshine Wash and Fold was small but immaculately kept. Family photographs lined the walls. The twins as toddlers, at birthdays, in school uniform. Crayon drawings were displayed prominently on the refrigerator, held by magnets shaped like fruit. It was a home filled with evidence of childhood, of care, of belonging. Alexander sat uncomfortably at a kitchen table barely large enough for four, a cup of jasmine tea cooling before him. The twins had been sent to their room with homework and strict instructions not to eavesdrop, though occasional giggles from the hallway suggested they weren't entirely complying. Maylin sat across from him, her posture straight, her gaze direct. "They saw your picture in the newspaper," she explained. "They've been told stories about their father all their lives. I never expected them to make the connection or to be bold enough to attend your ceremony." "Are they mine?" Alexander asked bluntly, unable to circle the question any longer. Maylin's expression remained neutral. Their mother believed they were. Lin Mei Hua. She nodded, something softening briefly in her gaze. "You remember her?" "Of course I remember her." The words came out sharper than intended. Alexander took a breath, modulating his tone. "She disappeared. No explanation, no contact. She made a choice she believed was best for everyone involved," Maylin replied carefully. "By the time she discovered she was pregnant, you were featured in the business section as a rising star. Your first development was breaking ground. She didn't want to complicate your trajectory." Alexander stared at his untouched teeth, processing her words. "She decided for me, without giving me a choice." "Would you have made a different one?" Maylin challenged, leaning forward slightly. 6 years ago, with your company in its infancy, would you have welcomed the news of... Would you have chosen family over ambition? The question struck with uncomfortable... 6 years ago, Alexander had been consumed with proving himself, with escaping the poverty of his childhood. Every decision had been calculated to advance his position, to secure his personal relationship had been evaluated solely for their strategic value. Would he have welcomed the variety of children? The truth was, he likely would have seen them as obstacles, complications to be managed rather than embraced. "Where is she now?" Maylin's expression closed again. I don't know. 3 years ago, she left for a job interview in Seattle and never returned. She called once to say she was safe but needed time. She asked me to care for the girls until she found her way back. Her voice wavered slightly. I've been waiting ever since. Alexander absorbed this info, trying to reconcile the Lynn he had known, passionate, responsible, loving, with a woman who would abandon her children. Did she leave anything for them? Letters? Explanations? Stories? Maylin said softly. She left them stories about their father, about a man who folded paper cranes and drank strong coffee, who sang lullabies in Mandarin when he thought no one was listening, who went away to become important but would return someday. The descriptions pierced Alexander with their accuracy. Lynn had known him, truly known him, in ways few others ever had. She had seen past his carefully constructed facade to the person beneath. The boy who still folded paper cranes as his mother had taught him, who still sang the lullabies she had crooned during his childhood illnesses. May I see them? He asked. Their room, I mean. Maylin studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Follow me. The twins' bedroom was small but cheerful, with twin beds covered in colorful quilts. A bookshelf overflowed with well-loved volumes, and string lights shaped like stars hung from the ceiling. On a small desk, a collection of origami animals, clumsy attempts at cranes, frogs, and butterflies. They taught themselves from library books, Maylin explained, following his gaze. They said they wanted to be ready when you came back. Something shifted in Alexander's chest, a tightening that was almost painful. These children had been waiting for him, preparing for his return, while he had built towers of glass and steel, chasing a success that suddenly seemed hollow. He approached the desk and, with practiced movements, folded a perfect crane from a sheet of notebook paper. Setting it beside their attempts, he felt a strange sense of connection, like completing a circuit long left open. What do you want, Mr. Chen? Maylin asked, voice gentle, but why did you come here? Alexander turned to face her, the answer forming as he spoke it. I want to know them. The Port Aurora Elementary School Fall Festival transformed the gymnasium into a riot of autumn colors. Paper leaves hung from the ceiling, and student artwork covered the walls. Families milled about, admiring displays and participating in games run by enthusiastic parent volunteers. Alexander arrived alone, feeling conspicuously out of place in his casual attire. The first time in years he had appeared in public without a suit. He had spent the previous evening researching appropriate clothing for school events and settled on dark jeans and a sweater that his stylist had once insisted would humanize him for a magazine profile. For the past week, he had been meeting the twins after school, spending carefully scheduled hours learning about their lives. They had shown him their favorite books, demonstrated their origami skills, and bombarded him with questions about his childhood in Taiwan and his journey to America. Each interaction was supervised by Maylin, whose cautious approval he had begun to earn through consistent presence and genuine interest. Today marked the first public event he would attend as, what? Their father? He hadn't claimed that title officially, though a DNA test, discreetly arranged through his personal physician, had confirmed what he already knew in his heart to be true. These were his daughters, and the reality of that fact still stunned him daily. He spotted them at the art display, wearing matching dresses in different colors, Lily in blue, Daisy in green. Maylin stood nearby, helping another parent arrange refreshments. When Lily saw him, she waved enthusiastically, drawing the attention of several nearby families. "You came!" she exclaimed as he approached. "Look, our class made a forest." She pointed proudly to a mural where each child had contributed a painted tree. Hers stood out for its vibrant red leaves and carefully detailed bark. "It's beautiful," Alexander said, genuinely impressed. "You're very talented." "Daisy's is better," Lily said without jealousy, pointing to her sister's tree with its delicate birds perched on branches. "She always makes the best pictures." "Both are extraordinary," Alexander assured them, aware of curious glances from other parents. His face had been in local papers enough that recognition was inevitable, especially after the ceremony which had generated considerable speculation. "Our class is performing a song next," Daisy said, tugging it. "Will you watch?" "Of course," Alexander promised, allowing himself to be led toward the makeshift stage at the far end of the gymnasium. The performances were charming in their earnestness, slightly off-key singing, forgotten dance steps covered with enthusiastic improvisation, recitations delivered with varying degrees of confidence. Alexander found himself genuinely engaged, recording videos on his phone to replay later. When the twins class took the stage for their musical number, he felt an unexpected surge of pride. They stood in the front row, singing with perfect synchronization, their voices clear and confident. The song was a traditional one he recognized from his own childhood, a Mandarin lullaby about moonlight and dreams. His mother had sung it to him during thunderstorms when he was small and frightened. The memory struck with such force that he missed a beat in his recording, the camera tilting momentarily toward the floor. As the song concluded, applause filled the gymnasium. The twins beamed, searching the audience until they found Alexander's face. He clapped harder than anyone, something warm and unfamiliar expanding in his chest. The moment shattered when Daisy suddenly crumpled to the floor, collapsing as the last notes faded. A collective gasp rippled through the audience. Alexander was moving before he realized it, pushing past parents and teachers to reach the stage. Mei-Lin arrived simultaneously from the other side. Together, they knelt beside Daisy's small form. Her face was flushed, her breathing rapid. "She gets like this sometimes," Lily explained, her voice trembling. "When it's hot, or when she gets too excited." A teacher was already calling for the school nurse. Alexander gently lifted Daisy, her weight alarmingly slight in his arms. Her eyes fluttered open briefly, focusing on his face with confused recognition before closing again. "The hospital is 5 minutes away," he said to Mei-Lin, already moving toward the exit. "My car is outside." In the emergency room, a doctor confirmed what Mei-Lin already suspected. A combination of excitement, the stuffy gymnasium, and mild dehydration had caused Daisy to faint. Nothing serious, but they wanted to run tests to rule out any underlying conditions. As they prepared to take Daisy for an EKG, a nurse approached with clipboard in hand. "Are you the father?" she asked Alexander. The question hung in the air between them. Mei-Lin watched him, her expression unreadable. Lily, clutching her sister's hand, looked up with wide, hopeful eyes. Alexander thought of towers rising against the sky, of boardrooms where his word was law, of the empire he had built to prove his worth. Then he looked at Daisy's pale face and felt the weight of the truth he could no longer deny, nor wanted to. Yes, the word both foreign and familiar on his tongue. "I'm their father." The photograph appeared in the Port Aurora Gazette 3 days later. Alexander Chen, billionaire developer, carrying a small girl through the elementary school parking lot, her twin sister running alongside, their guardian following close behind. The caption read, "Local businessman's secret family." By noon, Chen Development's stock had dropped 8 points. By evening, Alexander's phone had accumulated 37 missed calls from his executive, his publicist, and various board members, none of which he answered. Instead, he sat in Mei-Lin's modest kitchen, helping the twins with their mathematics homework. Daisy, fully recovered, carefully wrote equations, while Lily calculated sums in her head, announcing answers seconds before her sister could complete the written work. "You're both remarkably good at this," Alexander observed, genuinely impressed. "Mama said you were good with numbers too," Lily replied, erasing an error with fierce concentration. "She said you could look at a building and know exactly how many windows it needed and how much glass it would take." These casual mentions of Lynn appeared regularly in conversation, keeping her presence alive in the household. Each reference revealed another facet of what she had shared with their daughters, another thread connecting them to the father they had never known. When the homework was complete, Alexander taught them to fold more complex origami figures, a dragon with wings, a jumping frog that actually moved when pressed. Lily mastered the techniques quickly, while Daisy focused on adding artistic details to each completed piece. "Will you stay for dinner?" Mei-Lin asked from the doorway, observing their concentrated efforts. "I shouldn't," Alexander replied, suddenly aware of the time. "I have meetings." "Please," the twins asked in unison, mastering the art of synchronized pleading. Something in their expectant faces made it impossible. "I'll stay," he agreed, sending a brief message to cancel his evening appointments. Dinner was simple: steamed fish, rice, vegetables prepared with careful attention. The twins chattered about school friends, books they were reading, a bird's nest they had discovered in the park. It was ordinary conversation, the kind that filled millions of homes each evening. Yet to Alexander, it felt This was family, messy, unplanned, inconvenient, wonderful. Nothing like the strategic alliances and calculated relationships that filled his professional world. Nothing like the careful distance he had maintained in his personal life. As he helped clear the table afterward, his phone vibrated with an incoming call. The screen displayed Patricia Lawson's name, his head of legal, who had been trying to reach him all day. With a sigh, he answered. "Alexander, finally." Patricia's voice was tight with controlled panic. "The board is calling an emergency meeting tomorrow morning. They're concerned about the company's image. the impact on the monarch's sales. I understand, he interrupted. I'll be there. We need a statement. David suggests a firm denial of petition, followed by, no. Alexander's voice was quiet. No denial. A pause. Alexander, surely you're not considering... I'll see you tomorrow, Patricia. He ended the call before she could... When he returned to the kitchen, Mei-Lin was alone, wiping down counters with methodical precision. Problems? She asked, not looking up. Nothing I can't handle, Alexander assured her, taking a towel to dry the dishes she had washed. They worked in companionable silence for several minutes before Mei-Lin spoke again. This won't be easy, you know, for any of us. Alexander set down a plate, considering her words. I've never chosen the easy path. This isn't about choosing a business strategy or a building design, she countered, finally meeting his gaze. This is about two little girls who have already lost one parent. If you step into their lives, it cannot be tentative or temporary. They deserve better than that. I know. The truth of her statement resonated. These past days had shown him what it meant to be needed, not for his money or influence, but simply for his presence. To be valued, not for what he could provide, but for who he was. Do you? Mei-Lin challenged gently. Your world and theirs are very different. Can you bridge that gap? Are you willing to try? Before he could answer, Lily appeared in the doorway, clutching a book. Bedtime story? He asked hopefully. Alexander glanced at Mei-Lin, who nodded her permission. He followed Lily to the bedroom, where Daisy was already in bed, covers pulled to her chin. He sat between their beds. The book, a collection of Chinese folktales, open in his lap. Mama used to read to us in Mandarin, Daisy said. Can you? Alexander hesitated. His native language had grown rusty with disuse, deliberately set aside in his quest to assimilate, to succeed in his adopted country. But for these children, his children, he could reclaim what he had abandoned. Once, he began in Mandarin, the words coming back more easily than expected, there was a crane who wished to touch the moon. The twins listened with rapt attention, occasionally asking questions or pointing to illustrations. As the story concluded, Lily's eyes were already drooping, but Daisy remained alert, studying his face with serious consideration. Will you sing the moon song? She asked. The one Mama said was your favorite. Alexander felt a catch in his throat. The lullaby, the same one their class had performed at the... Lin had remembered it, all these had shared it with their daughters as a connection to the father they had never known. Softly, he began to sing the familiar melody. The Mandarin lyrics flowed naturally, a river returning to its original course after years of diversion. By the second verse, both girls were asleep, their breathing deep and even. He sat between them for a long time, watching their peaceful faces and considering Mei-Lin's question. Could he bridge the gap between his world and theirs? Was he willing to try? The answer came not as words, but as certainty, a knowledge as fundamental as the pull of gravity. For these children, he would reshape not just his schedule or priorities, but the very foundations of his life. The realization was both terrifying and liberating. Tomorrow, he would face his board, his investors, the press. He would make decisions that would alter the course of the empire he had built. But tonight, in this small room above a laundromat, Alexander Chen had already made the most important decision of his life. He was their father, and he always would be. The Chen Development Boardroom occupied the entire top floor of their headquarters, its windows offering panoramic views of Port Aurora Bay. 22 executives sat around a massive table of polished walnut, expressions ranging from concern to poorly disguised hostility. At the head of the table, Alexander remained standing, his posture relaxed despite the tension filling the room. The market response has been significant, Martin Wells explained, gesturing to the projected figures behind him. The Monarch pre-sales have slowed by 30%. We've had 3 major investors express concerns about company stability. Our stock is down 12 points since the photograph was published. Patricia Lawson stepped forward, legal briefs clutched in manicured hands. We've prepared a statement denying any confirmed relationship while suggesting compassionate interest in the children's welfare. We've also drafted a quiet settlement agreement for the guardian to sign, including generous financial provisions and a strict confidentiality clause. Alexander listened silently, allowing them to complete their presentation. When they finished, expectant gazes turned toward him, awaiting his approval of their damage control strategy. Instead, he picked up the remote and switched off the projection. Thank you for your diligence, his voice calm but resolute. But we will not be issuing any denials or offering settlement. A wave of murmurs swept the room. David Zhao leaned forward, confusion evident on his face. Then what is our strategy? We need to contain this situation before... There is nothing to contain, Alexander interrupted. The twins, Lily and Daisy Wong, are my biological daughters. I have confirmed this through DNA testing. The room fell into stunned silence. Patricia recovered first, her legal mind already calculating new scenarios. If that's the case, we need to frame this carefully. A narrative about recent discovery. We could position you as the responsible businessman, stepping up once paternity was established. No more narratives, Alexander. No more carefully constructed images. The truth is simple. I have 2 daughters I didn't know existed. Now I do. And I intend to be their father in every sense of the word. Martin Wells cleared his throat, discomfort evident in his posture. Alexander, your personal choices are your own, but as CEO of a publicly traded company, you have responsibilities to shareholders. The market doesn't respond well to complications. Is that what children are to us? Complications? Alexander's gaze swept the room, noting how many averted their eyes. Have we become so fixated on market value that we've forgotten human value? He moved to the window, looking out at the city he had helped reshape. The Monarch rose in the distance, its glass exterior catching the morning light. Once, that view had represented everything he valued: achievement, recognition, control. Now it seemed strangely incomplete. Effective immediately, he announced, turning back to face the board. I am stepping down as CEO of Chen Development. The declaration elicited gasps and protests. Several board members rose to their feet, speaking simultaneously. Alexander raised a hand, commanding silence through sheer force of presence. I will retain my position as majority shareholder and transition to chairman of the board, focusing on long-term strategy rather than day-to-day operations. He paused, allowing the information to register. Additionally, I am establishing the Wong Chen Foundation, dedicated to supporting children in need of stable housing and educational opportunities. Patricia's legal mind immediately grasped the implications. You're naming it after them. You're making this public. I'm making it real, Alexander. My daughters deserve to know their father is proud of them, not hiding them away as... The meeting dissolved into heated debates about succession planning, market strategy, and public relations approaches. Alexander participated where necessary, but his mind had already moved beyond the boardroom. For the first time in his career, the most important meeting of his day would not involve investors or developers, but 2 small girls waiting to show him their science projects. 3 months after the fall festival, Sunshine Wash and Fold underwent renovations. New machines replaced the aging equipment, the storefront received a fresh coat of paint, and the apartment above was expanded to include an additional bedroom and a proper study area for the twins. Alexander had offered to purchase a house, something larger, in a more prestigious neighborhood, but Mei Lin had firmly declined. This laundromat had been her mother's legacy, this apartment the only home the twins had known. Some roots, she explained, were too important to transplant. Instead, he invested in improvements that would make their lives more comfortable, while respecting the foundation they had built. The changes were practical rather than ostentatious: better heating, updated plumbing, built-in bookshelves designed to the twins' specifications. On weekends, Alexander took the girls to places that had shaped his own childhood: the botanical gardens, where his mother had taught him plant names in both Mandarin and English, the harbor, where he had watched ships arrive from distant ports, the community center, where he had learned to play chess. Each excursion bridged another gap in their shared history, creating memories to replace the years they had lost. Lily and Daisy flourished under his attention, revealing distinct personalities that had once been blurred in his perception of them as simply the twins. Lily was bold and analytical, approaching problems with systematic determination. Daisy was observant and artistic, noticing details others overlooked. Both possessed an emotional intelligence that frequently left Alexander humbled. They get that from their mother, Mei Lin observed one evening as they watched the girls attempt to teach Alexander's driver, Mr. Patel, the rules of a card game they had invented. Lin could always see straight to the heart of people. The mention of Lin no longer created tension between them. In the months since Alexander had entered the twins' lives, he and Mei Lin had developed a partnership built on mutual respect and shared purpose. She remained their primary caregiver, the constant presence who maintained daily routines and household stability. He provided resources, weekend adventures, and another kind of love, equally vital but different in its expression. Together, they formed an unconventional family unit, adapting and adjusting as circumstances required. When business took Alexander to New York for 3 days, he called each evening to hear about school projects and neighborhood news. When Daisy developed a mild fever, he cancelled a board meeting to sit beside her bed, reading stories until she fell asleep. The press eventually lost interest in the billionaire's secret family, especially once Alexander's foundation began making substantial donations to local education initiatives. The narrative shifted from scandal to redemption, a common enough transformation in American media culture. What remained private, known only to those directly involved, was the deeper transformation occurring within Alexander himself. The man who had once measured success in square footage and profit margin now found himself calculating different metrics: the number of origami animals lining the twins' bookshelf, the frequency of spontaneous hugs, the gradual disappearance of hesitation when they called him Dad. On a crisp Saturday in early February, Alexander arrived at the laundromat to find Maylene alone, her expression utterly serious. The girls are at their friend Sophie's birthday party, gesturing for him to sit at the kitchen table. "I wanted to speak with you privately." She placed a wooden box before him, its surface worn smooth with handling. This arrived yesterday, for the girls. Alexander opened it carefully, finding a collection of sealed envelopes inside, each labeled with a date. The handwriting was immediately familiar, the same elegant script that had once left him notes about dinner reservations or reminders to call his contractor.
"Lynn," lifting one envelope from the box. "Where did this come from?"
There was a return address in Montreal. No name, just an address. Alexander examined the postmark, confirming it had been mailed recently. "She's alive. She's in Canada." Maylin nodded, her expression complicated, relief mingled with apprehension. "The letter on top is for you." He hadn't noticed it, tucked against the side of the box. His name was written on the envelope in the same distinctive handwriting. With slightly unsteady hands, he opened it, unfolding several pages of closely written text. "Alexander, if you're reading this, then the girls have found you, or you have found them. Either way, a truth long buried has finally emerged, and for that I am both grateful and terrified. I owe you an explanation, though I'm not certain any explanation will suffice for what I've done. When I discovered I was pregnant, your first development was breaking ground. Your name appeared in business journals alongside phrases like rising star and visionary. You were becoming the success you had always worked toward. I knew what children would mean to your trajectory, the complications, the distractions, the divided focus. I told myself I was protecting your dreams. In truth, I was also protecting myself from rejection. It seemed easier to disappear than to face the possibility that you might choose your ambitions over us. Perhaps that was unfair to you. Perhaps you deserved the chance to make that choice yourself. The twins were born on April 12th, perfect and healthy, and so clearly yours in their expressions, in the determined set of their tiny jaws. I named them Lily and Daisy, flowers that return year after year, resilient and beautiful. I told them stories about you, true stories of the man I had known, not the public figure you became. I wanted them to understand that their father was not just a successful businessman, but a person of depth and history. 3 years ago, I made another terrible choice. I received a diagnosis that terrified me: early-stage breast cancer. The treatment options were good, but the medical costs overwhelming. I couldn't bear for the girls to watch me deteriorate, to worry about losing another parent. So I left them with Maylin, the only person I trusted completely, and went to stay with a cousin in Canada where treatment was more affordable. I intended to return when I was well. Then I saw a photograph in an international business magazine. You, cutting the ribbon on a new development, surrounded by admiring investors. You looked happy, fulfilled, complete. I convinced myself that disrupting your life would be selfish, that the girls were better off with Maylin's consistent care than with my illness and your potential rejection. The letters in this box are ones I wrote during my treatment and recovery, one for each month I was away. They contain everything I couldn't say in person: my fears, my hopes, my love for them. I've sent them now because recent tests confirm I am cancer-free, and because I finally found the courage to face the consequences of my choices. I don't expect forgiveness, Alexander, nor do I expect to reclaim what my absence has cost, but I would like, if possible, to find a way back into their lives, not to disrupt what you and Maylene have built, but to add another thread of love to the tapestry of their childhood. If this seems impossible, I understand. I've included my contact information below. The decision to reach out or not is yours, as it should have been years ago. With regret and hope, Lynn. Alexander read the letter twice, absorbing each word, each implication. Emotions cycled through him. Anger at being denied knowledge of his children, relief that Lynn was alive and well, confusion about what her return might mean for the fragile family structure they had created. "Did you read that?" Who had remained silent. She shook her head. "Only the one addressed to me." She explained her illness, her treatment, asked for my forgiveness. Her voice softened. "Asked about you."
What did you tell her?
"The truth," Mei Lin replied, "that you have become the father they all." Alexander carefully refolded the letter, considering his next steps. The old Alexander would have analyzed this development purely for its potential complications: the disruption to established routines, the need to renegotiate relationships, the possible public relations implications. The man he was becoming thought instead of two little girls who had never stopped waiting for their mother's return, who deserved to know she had never stopped loving them, even when circumstances and fear had separated them. "We should call her," he said finally, "together." They met in a quiet cafe near the harbor, neutral ground where passing ships created a constant backdrop of movement and change. Alexander arrived first, securing a corner table with privacy and good lighting. Mei Lin came next, the twins between her, their best dresses worn for an occasion they didn't fully understand. "Is it really her?" Lily asked for the third time that morning, fidgeting with the paper napkin before her. "Is Mama really coming back?" "Yes," Alexander assured her, though his own stomach twisted with uncertainty. "She's been away getting better. She's very excited to see you both." "Will she stay this time?" Daisy's question cut to the heart of the man, her perceptiveness revealing the fear beneath her quiet exterior. Alexander exchanged glances with Mei Lin, neither certain how to answer truthfully without creating expectations they couldn't guarantee would be met. Before they could formulate a response, the cafe door opened. Lin Meihua stood framed in the entrance, scanning the room with nervous intensity. She was thinner than Alexander remembered, her once long hair now cut in a short, practical style that emphasized her delicate features. She wore a simple blue dress and carried a small gift bag in. The twins spotted her simultaneously. Their reactions were instantaneous and opposite. Lily bolted from her chair and ran toward Lin with a cry of recognition, while Daisy froze, pressing closer to Mei Lin's side, uncertainty written across her face. Lin knelt to receive Lily's fierce embrace, tears streaming openly down her cheeks. Over Lily's shoulder, her eyes found Alexander's, a silent communication filled with gratitude, apology, and trepidation. He rose and approached them, Daisy's small hand clutched in. When he reached them, he simply nodded, an acknowledgement of her presence that carried neither judgment nor immediate forgiveness. "Daisy," Lin said, extending her hand but not forcing contact. "You've grown so tall." Daisy regarded her mother with solemn consideration, then glanced up at Alexander as if seeking permission or reassurance. He squeezed her hand gently, letting her know whatever she chose was acceptable. After a moment that stretched like eternity, Daisy stepped forward and allowed Lin to embrace her. The contact was tentative at first, then tightened as recognition overcame hesitation. They returned to the table, an awkward procession of reconnection and caution. The twins sat between Lin and Alexander, with Mei Lin completing their circle. Conversation began haltingly, safe topics like school projects and favorite books, before gradually deepening into more significant territory. Lin explained her illness in simplified terms, appropriate for the girl's understanding, emphasizing that she was now healthy and would not disappear again. She presented her gifts, handcrafted music boxes that played the lullaby she had taught them, each containing a small golden locket with family photograph. Throughout the exchange, Alexander observed rather than participated, studying the woman who had once been central to his life, who had borne his children in his absence, who had made decisions that altered all their fates. He searched for anger within himself and found it largely dissipated, replaced by a complex mixture of regret for what might have been and appreciation for what now was. As the meeting concluded, practical matters required discussion. Lin had found an apartment nearby and secured a teaching position at a local school. She wanted regular visits with the twins, but recognized that Mei Lin's home remained their primary resident. She acknowledged Alexander's paternal rights and expressed willingness to formalize a co-parenting arrangement that prioritized stability for the girls. The conversation was reasonable, measured, mature, nothing like the dramatic confrontations Alexander had half expected. Lin was neither demanding nor defensive, simply present and determined to rebuild connections severed by fear and circumstance. As they prepared to leave, Lin pulled Alexander aside, while Mei Lin helped the twins. "Thank you for being the father I always believed you could be." "I'm still learning," watching as Lily demonstrated a new origami fold for Mei Lin. every day. That's what makes you good at it. Lin's smile was tinged with sadness, the willingness to learn. The Wangchen Foundation opened its headquarters in April, occupying the ground floor of the Monarch, space originally designated for exclusive retail shops. The decision to convert prime commercial real estate into a non-profit center had raised eyebrows among Alexander's businesses, but the foundation's mission, providing housing security and educational support for vulnerable families, had garnered significant positive attention. The grand opening coincided with the twins' 7th birthday. They stood proudly beside Alexander for the ribbon-cutting ceremony, dressed in matching dresses of different colors, their established tradition. Mei-Lin and Lin flanked them, an unconventional family unit that had found its own balance over the preceding months. Journalists noted the contrast with Alexander's previous ceremony at this same location, how the man who had once recoiled in shock at the twins' appearance now beamed with pride as they helped him cut the ribbon. How the businessman once known for his emotional detachment now openly displayed affection, kneeling to embrace his daughters as applause filled the plaza. "I know you," Lily whispered in his ear during that embrace, repeating the words that had changed everything 6 months earlier. "You're our daddy." "Yes," Alexander, his voice steady with certainty. "I always will be." The foundation's first initiative funded renovations for Sunshine Wash and Fold, transforming it into a community center with expanded laundry facilities, a homework help area, and employment resources for single parents. Mei-Lin served as its director, her practical wisdom and compassionate approach perfectly suited to the role. Lin taught at the elementary school, rebuilding her relationship with the twins through daily presence and unwavering commitment. She and Alexander maintained a respectful co-parenting relationship, their shared love for their daughters creating a bridge across past hurts and misunderstandings. Alexander continued as chairman of Chen Development, but his focus had shifted dramatically. New projects incorporated affordable housing units and community spaces. Profit remained important. He was still a businessman at heart, but it no longer served as the sole measure of success. His penthouse in the Spire acquired colorful additions, crayon drawings framed alongside architectural awards, shelves of children's books beside business texts, a piano where the twins practiced simple melodies with determined concentration. 3 evenings each week and every weekend belonged exclusively to family time, his calendar blocked with the same unwavering priority once reserved for investor meetings. On a warm Sunday morning in May, Alexander sat on a bench in Port Aurora Botanical Gardens, watching as the twins explored a butterfly exhibit with Lin and Mei-Lin. The women had developed their own unlikely friendship, united by their devotion to the girls and their shared exasperation with Alexander's occasional corporate rigidity. As he observed this unconventional family he had somehow acquired, Alexander reflected on the transformation of the past 6 months. He had lost nothing of real value, not his company, not his wealth, not his position. What he had gained, however, was immeasurable. The knowledge that he was capable of love, the discovery that vulnerability required greater courage than control, the realization that true legacy resided not in buildings but in the lives he touched. A butterfly landed briefly on Daisy's outstretched hand, causing her to squeal with delight. She looked up, searching for Alexander, eager to share the moment. When their eyes met across the garden, her smile illuminated something within him that had long remained dark. He had spent decades constructing an empire of glass and steel, believing it would fulfill the emptiness left by his childhood losses. Instead, it had taken 2 small girls in oversized sweaters, their voices raised in public challenge, to show him what he had been building toward all along. Not towers that reached for the sky, but connections that anchored him to earth. Not a legacy of property, but one of love. Not an empire, but a family. It was, Alexander Chen realized as he rose to join his daughters, the most important development. If stories like this moved you, remember that transformation often begins with a single truth spoken aloud, and the courage to hear it.